Well, now we can talk on the ISI and Washington Consensus, basically. Let me start with the Washington Consensus. Well, ISI, if you remember, um, was the system at which governments, by restricting the importation of certain goods, as well as by supporting certain industries, was basically increasing the capacity of those sectors to um, well, to become more competitive, and hopefully in time they will be able to remove those protections, and that sector will be able to compete at global level and sell their products at global level. Um, the and the countries which were actually promoting ISI, they also followed in different ways the uh, developing world in creating a welfare system, which especially encouraged the people, their citizens to get education and become more productive. Of course, they could not lift people from poverty as much as developed countries have done, but to some extent they might also have provided some kind of a state healthcare system, even though it might in many cases be not that much, not that good, basically. And they might also create a kind of a public transportation system and public housing system. Again, not necessarily it might be that good, and it might be limited to certain areas of the country also. But state was also trying to create some minimum living standards, and to some extent also of people, and to some extent also help workers to get higher revenue and get better education and certain means to become more productive. All of these attempts of government to manage economy and create development had created, according to the critiques of ISI, first, it has created dependency to the government. So basically, people get that government support, but they don't learn to become productive by themselves. So instead of becoming more productive and getting basically the revenues of their productivity, benefits of their increased productivity, they rather depend on government support. This is true for the sectors that are getting government support to develop and arguably become more competitive. This might even true for the people who got education. I mean, instead of becoming getting most of the education, since they got the education for free, they might not basically benefit from the education as much, according to this idea, for example. And also, I mean, all those living standards that are provided by the government might make people not to work as hard as they want to. And the solution is, again, allowing market to work. And if market is promoting certain sectors, which might be input sectors like mining sector or the agricultural sector, let those sectors to develop as much as it can. And those sectors, when they develop, they provide also many people with a lot of income, and those people might use that income to actually develop industry also in the country. As a bonus point, if you don't have government regulation, also you might have international capital flowing to your country, which might also develop your industry and the sectors you think you need to develop to have a developed economic, becoming the developed countries club. That was the Washington Consensus. Consensus means something that was agreed by everyone. If we are 5 people, if we have consensus, that means all 5 of us have agreed on it. So when we are talking on Washington Consensus, I mean, it should be something that should be agreed on everyone. But who are those everyone? Those everyone are the heads of the international agencies. The developing countries themselves are not part of the consensus. But starting with 1970s and 80s, when the world entered to a crisis, those countries still they had some industries within themselves, but those industries were still not, in many ways, not that as competitive as them as their counterparts in the developed countries. So basically, what happened was the those countries were still selling the agricultural products and mines, basically the minerals. And when the economies of the world entered to a crisis, demand of what they were exporting has fallen, and those countries basically suddenly could not sell as much as get as much revenue as they were getting before from the developed world, and to sustain the they enter to international to debt. The as a nation starts to accumulate debt, and governments try to cure this problem, and they also try to maintain this programs and supports they were giving to them to certain industries, and in time also government starts to accumulate debt. So in the end, for government supporting this economic infrastructure, which was built according to guidelines of SI, become more and more difficult. Especially international balances, international level, it become more difficult. And those countries needed, for example, the support from well, as a country, they need support to get rid of debt, get their government functioning, basically, because that debt threatens them. They become, in some cases, it will become even impossible for them to pay the debt itself, let alone run the economic infrastructure, which requires their support. And they also required the help of IMF to get sufficient level of dollars in their economic system. Because of this international imbalances, they keep sending their dollars to outside of the to developed countries, basically, and they required help from World Bank, and which helps the governments in fiscal sense, and they required help from IMF, which helps the governments in the monetary sense. But the IMF and the World Bank were founded by the premises that they help the countries that were in need. But now, IMF and World Bank come to those countries justified by the view that, your problem is not a one-time problem, but your problem is a systemic problem. So if we just pay you and get you out of this this problem by borrowing you money, you will get the problem again and again and again and again, and at the end even IMF might go bankrupt. So you need to make structural adjustments, which might mean increasing taxes to basically lower the government spending, and basically even adjusting your exchange rate. Allowing your exchange rate to flow freely up and down, allowing your money to devaluate. Basically reduce the support you give to different sectors, to your producers. Reduce the support you might even give to your workers and students. Governments usually didn't like it, but when they are in deep financial trouble, they might have no choice but to sign the agreements. And those agreement programs were called structural agreement programs. Turkey also signed one of them at the time of Ecevit, the Ecevit's presidency, where the Devlet Bahçeli and the Mesut Yılmaz were also partners of the governments. They signed this agreement, And those agreements were actually taught by some people as kind of even neo-colonialism. I mean, as you might remember that after colonies have become independent, they said, okay, we should be independent in running our countries. But now IMF, for doing, well, according to these critics, what they were supposed to do, well, helping the countries when they're in financial trouble, they want to get into the financial matters of those countries. Well, the question could be, would they do the same thing? Do they do the same thing when developed countries need those types of financial help? But of course, the answer might be at that time, especially it was more the dominant answer. Those countries did not have that kind of systemic problems. Although the developed countries themselves have also accumulating government debt problem. Uh, Accumulating government debt problem was in no way limited to the developing countries. So the real role, aim, and result of this IMF structural adjustment program was a big discussion. And IMF was also, many people in developing countries also start not liking IMF and start seeing IMF as a institution that is actually harming the producers of those developing countries as well as workers of these developing countries. So the economic liberalization, I mean, that was another type of the adjustment programs, making markets more less regulated, which according to the argument would actually increase the economic growth, was the thing that was the new type of development model, which was, according to the argument, will lead those countries to the development. Did it? So now we are many years away from this adjustment problems. It did well. Just like ISI also created some development. It was accompanied with some kind of development, but large scale of inequality increase and mixed results with power. When you think about fighting with poverty, were the outcomes of this economic liberalization model, and many countries, to some extent, at least not in full sense, but to some extent at least, they left this economic liberalization model. They created back some regulations and some government intervention to the economy, and that itself was the result of another economic development model, which was centered in East Asia and which was, even up to this point, very, very successful. We will talk on that model, but before doing that, this East Asian development model, we will look to the financialization, and then we will look to the certain trends in the economic system. Well, financialization, as we have seen, actually, I mean, the main financial system, which was aiming to fixing the exchange rates, has collapsed in 1970s with the end of Bretton Woods system, which was fixing dollar to the gold value of gold and fixing the other exchange, the other national currencies to the the value of the other national currencies to the the ratio of the value of other national currencies to the dollar was fixed by central banks of those countries, and the value of the dollar ratio of the value of the dollar to the gold was fixed by the US central bank. That system has ended. Now the exchange rates could move freely, which was considered something good. So I will talk more on this in the next part. Basically, see you in the next part.